You know, the kind of silence that doesn't fill a room, but empties it? That's what it felt like. Melissa didn't even look at me when she said it. Charles just kept adjusting his tie like he had a board meeting to impress, not a son to bury. You're not really family, Ethan, she said, as if it were a weather report. You were here because your grandmother insisted, that's all. I stood in front of them like a well-dressed ghost. I was raised in their house, ate at their table, repeated thank yous with the precision of survival, but none of it mattered now. Not the birthdays she skipped. Not the scraped knees I washed myself. Not the nights I sat at the kitchen table, doing math homework by flashlight, while they laughed in the living room. What about tomorrow? I asked. I made sure my voice didn't shake. She didn't flinch. Charles gave a shrug, as though the conversation was beneath him. Nothing's going to change that. I smiled. They had no idea. Tomorrow was the will reading, and tomorrow wasn't going to be kind to them. Let me take you back, not with some drawn-out sob story, just a moment. I was 19, outside the courthouse, holding a paper cup of stale coffee. Inside, the man who hurt my grandmother had just been sentenced. Melissa and Charles didn't come, said it wasn't worth the trouble. She's old, Charles had muttered. Let it go. But I didn't let it go. I sat with her that day, listened to her breathe, like it cost her something. And then she whispered, just for me. You're the only one who stayed. That's enough. She could have left me money right then, and I wouldn't have needed it. But instead, she gave me something more valuable, trust. The next few years, I disappeared in the way people do when they're building something in silence. By day, I worked in a used bookstore, the kind with bent shelves and receipts from 2009 stuck between pages. By night, I was someone else. A name no one in my family knew. A strategist, a fixer, clients from Zurich, Singapore, Los Angeles. They knew me only through encrypted inboxes and clean solutions. By 23, I had outgrown the bookstore. By 24, I had outgrown the version of me they thought would fail. Melissa and Charles never asked where I was going, never asked what I did, just told people I was still figuring things out. Good. Let them believe I was fumbling, that I'd peaked in high school, that I was clinging to their pity like an anchor. I didn't need their validation. I had something better. In the top drawer of my desk was an envelope, cream-colored, slightly yellowed at the edges. It had her handwriting, Grandmother Edith Langford. Don't open it, she had told me, until the day of the reading, and I didn't. But I looked at it sometimes, when things were hard, when the world felt loud and I felt like a whisper, because I knew it meant something. And tomorrow, when the room fills with smug smiles and fake pearls, that envelope would speak louder than all of them. The building looked more like a museum than a law office. Gray stone, glass panes so polished they mirrored the city back at itself. The kind of place that whispers, don't touch anything, even if you haven't stepped inside yet. I arrived early, not because I was eager, but because I had learned long ago that silence is a weapon when wielded before others arrive. I wore the same charcoal coat I wore to her funeral. Nothing flashy. No designer label stitched into the lining. No gold cufflinks. Just cloth, clean lines, and quiet grief. Melissa swept in 15 minutes later, her heels clacking like they owned the floor. Charles followed, checking his watch like he had somewhere more important to be than his own mother-in-law's final goodbye. Then came the others. Aunt Loretta in her ever-too-loud perfume, Uncle Jeremy pretending not to recognize me, and that cousin Derek who once locked me outside in the rain and called it a test of toughness. They all glanced my way like I was a wrong turn on the family tree, like I wasn't supposed to be here. Isabella, my business partner, the only one in the room who knew what I'd become, sent me a brief nod from her place near the lawyer. And then the door opened again. Georgia Hammond entered. Steel gray bun, burgundy lips, legal folder clutched tight. If professionalism had a human form, it would wear her shoes. She sat, adjusted her glasses. We're here today for the formal reading of the last will and testament of Edith Langford. she said. Eyes flicked toward Melissa. Melissa didn't blink. Charles had that tight-lipped grin people wear when they think they've already won. Georgia continued. But before we begin, Edith left a personal request. She turned to me. Ethan, your grandmother asked that you read a letter aloud. Her final message. To be opened in this room. There it was. The envelope. I pulled it from my coat pocket. The moment I did, I could feel the mood shift, like someone had cracked open a hidden door, and the air pressure changed. I unfolded the page. My voice, when it came, was steady. My dearest Ethan, if they're already looking at you like you don't belong, let them. This room isn't full of family. It's full of people who showed up for a paycheck, wearing pearls and smiles they bought for the occasion. But you, my boy, you were the only one who came when I couldn't walk, who held my hand when the others left. You were not born of me, but you carry everything I believe in: kindness, loyalty, integrity, and quiet strength. So I am giving you everything. The houses, the accounts, the publishing legacy yours. Not for vengeance, not for pride, but because you earned it with love, not blood. Make me proud. With all my love, Grandma Edith. The room didn't breathe. I could hear the whir of the AC, the faint buzz of a light bulb above. Then the smallest sound, Charles swallowing his spit like it had turned to glass. Derek scoffed. Melissa still didn't blink. Georgia placed a second folder on the table. This one was thick, and gold embossed with my name, Ethan Langford. Effective immediately, she said. Ethan Langford is the sole beneficiary of the Edith Langford estate. You could feel it the way denial cracks just before panic takes root. She continued, smooth as marble. The estate includes 3 properties: Aspen, Napa Valley, and Portland, Maine. Langford Publishing, with its assets and operations, stock holdings totaling $8, $3 million, and the remainder of liquid assets, total estate value of $12.7 million. Charles opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Melissa finally blinked, and Georgia wasn't done. For clarity, she said, Edith Langford legally adopted Ethan at age 5. He is, by law, her son, not merely her grandson. These terms were updated, notarized, and reinforced in her most recent codicil. No one moved. I stood. Not out of defiance, not for show. I simply didn't want to be seated when their delusion burned away. I turned toward the door. Melissa's voice broke the silence, sharp and thin. We raised you. We gave you a home, food, clothes. I paused, turned back, met her eyes for the first time all morning. You raised me like a guest, I said, fed me like an obligation, made sure I knew every day I wasn't yours. And now, I finally agree with you. I walked out, not hurried, not triumphant, just finished. Back in my apartment, small, plain, mine, I pulled the drawers open, began to pack. This place had been my chrysalis. Now, it was time to emerge. There was no need for tears, no need for shouting. They could rage against the truth all they wanted, but the truth didn't care, and neither did I. The news broke faster than I expected. One headline read, Estranged son inherits $12. 7 million Langford empire in stunning will twist. Another, adopted grandson becomes legal heir. Langford Publishing faces new leadership. By noon, my phone was drowning in calls from numbers I hadn't seen since my braces came off. People who once made sure I wasn't in the family group photo now wanted to grab lunch. Even the board members' men who once called me quiet as code for invisible now addressed me as Mr. Langford. The real surprise came a week later. I was in my new office, formerly Grandma's, when Isabella buzzed in. There's a woman here, she said through the intercom. Says her name is Melissa. She won't leave. I should have said no. But curiosity is a quiet itch. Send her in, I said. She walked in like a ghost. No heels today, just flats, wrinkled blouse, face pale like paper left in the sun too long. Ethan, she said softly. I didn't know. You didn't want to know, I replied. There's a difference. She stared at the floor. Then, quietly, Charles is drinking again. We lost the house. He's not well, and I don't know where to go. I said nothing. The silence was heavy but not cruel. Melissa pulled something from her bag. A letter. This is for you. I don't expect you to forgive us, but I hoped you'd remember the boy who used to beg for our approval. I took it, but I didn't promise to read it. She left. The door whispered shut behind her. Later that night, I did open it. The handwriting was shaky, slanted. Ethan, we were wrong. I was wrong. You were never the outsider. We were. I see now what Edith saw. We tried to raise you to know your place, but you built your own instead. I don't ask for anything, just help. If not for us, for the boy who still lives somewhere behind your eyes. I sat with that letter for a long time. Then I got up, not out of guilt, but because I refused to be shaped by their bitterness. The next morning I drove to what remained of their house. Paint peeling, garden gone to dust, porch light dead. Melissa opened the door. She looked 10 years older. Behind her, Charles sat hunched, gripping a bottle like it owed him something. I said nothing, just stepped in, placed a folder on the table. Inside, a 6-month prepaid rental lease. A referral to a rehab center. A note. I'm not like you. I won't abandon people. This is not a bridge. It's closure. Then I walked out. No applause, no dramatic exit, just silence. Again. But this silence was mine. Langford Publishing thrived under my direction. I rebuilt the structure, not just in marble and glass, but in purpose. New leadership, fair wages, a mentorship program for underrepresented writers. The board pushed back at first, but I didn't waver. By quarter's end, profits had climbed. Public image? Immaculate. They stopped questioning me after that. One night my phone buzzed. Nathan. Saw the article. You made it. Knew you would. Proud of you. That meant more than the money, because Nathan was there long before any of this mattered. Still, the weight of it all didn't leave. Even in success, I carried something. Not pain. Just the echo of not being chosen. The truth is, when someone tells you long enough that you don't belong, some part of you starts to believe it. Even after you've proven them wrong. Even after you've inherited the whole damn building. Then, the call came. Hospital. Charles. Liver failure. Melissa was crying. He's asking for you, she said. He keeps saying your name. I drove. Not because I owed him anything, but because I had become the man he never expected me to be, the kind that shows up even for the people who never did the same. He was thinner now. Eyes dull. Voice barely a whisper. I was wrong, he rasped. About everything. I nodded. That was enough. Melissa followed me out. Why are you helping us? I looked her straight in the eyes. Because I won't be like you, I said. And I never will. Back in the office, Isabella handed me a draft. Press release is ready. Do you want the original headline? Langford legacy continued by adopted grandson? I shook my head. Change it, she smiled. Title? I leaned back in the chair that once belonged to the woman who saved me. A new chapter, the legacy. He wasn't meant to inherit. 3 weeks after the hospital visit, the phone rang again. It was Georgia Hammond, my grandmother's lawyer, the woman who never called unless something needed to be signed in triplicate. There's one more envelope, she said. From Edith. It was meant to reach you after everything's settled. She instructed me to give it to you once the estate transfer was finalized. I didn't speak. I just nodded, though she couldn't see me. When I arrived at her office, she handed me the letter like it weighed more than $12 million ever could. Good luck, she said. That was all. The envelope was thinner than the last. Inside, a single folded page and a small brass key. I unfolded the paper, and her handwriting hit me like a memory. Ethan, by now, you've seen what they tried to keep from you, your birthright, your power, your truth. But there's still one piece left. You are not just the person I raised. You are more than what they claimed you were. If you're holding this, it means you're ready to know everything. Go to the attic. I knew exactly where she meant. The attic of her old house. The one Charles sold off 2 years after she died. But some part of me knew it hadn't all been emptied. I called the current homeowner. Told them who I was. They agreed to let me visit for sentimental closure. They didn't ask questions. The attic was musty. The light bulb swung from the ceiling like it still hadn't forgiven the wind. And in the far corner under a quilt, beside a half-rotted trunk, was a cedar box. I used the brass key. It clicked open like it had been waiting. Inside, a collection of letters. A stack of legal documents. A photo of my grandmother holding a toddler me on her hip. And then, the truth. A second will. Not of her estate, but of guardianship. Adoption. I skimmed it, my hands shaking, vision blurring slightly as I moved through signatures and seals. Edith. Langford had adopted me legally when I was 5. Not as a favor, not as a placeholder, but as her son, which meant Melissa hadn't raised a charity case. She'd raised her brother. I sat down right there on the wooden floorboards, the air thin with dust and truth. Later that evening, I stood in my office, holding the documents in one hand, the past in the other. I called Melissa and Charles, asked them to come in, told them it was about the estate technically true. They arrived, both of them, smaller somehow. Charles was sober. Melissa was quiet. Neither made eye contact. I didn't waste time. I slid the documents across the desk. You told me I was lucky to be let into this family. But here's the truth, you were the outsiders. Charles squinted. Melissa unfolded the paper with slow, trembling hands. I wasn't just your mother-in-law's favorite, I said. I was her son. Legally. Fully. Since I was 5, you didn't raise me. You tried to tolerate me. And even that failed. The color drained from Melissa's face. You have no idea what you're doing, she whispered. You're wrong, I said. I know exactly what I'm doing. That was the last time we spoke. I didn't hear from them again. No calls, no emails, just silence. And for once, I didn't need to fill it. Langford Publishing grew fast. We launched an imprint for emerging voices, funded fellowships for underrepresented writers. I greenlit projects my grandmother had once dreamed of, but never saw through. One afternoon, Isabella came into my office with a grin. You were invited to speak at the Creative Legacy Awards, she said. They want you to talk about transformation. I laughed softly. I've had some practice. The night of the ceremony, I stood backstage, looking out over the crowd. Somewhere near the front sat Nathan, smiling like he'd always known I'd end up here. I took a breath, stepped up to the podium. I was once told that I didn't belong, I said. That love could be conditional, and family had to be earned. But I've learned something since then. Family isn't defined by blood, but by who stands with you when no one else does. I used to think I had to fight to prove my worth. But the truth? I never needed their approval, just my own. Applause swelled. But in my heart, I heard only one voice. Her voice. Later that night, I returned to my apartment. Yes, I still kept it. I didn't need this space. But I needed the memory. The cracked window. The one lamp. The photo on the wall. Me and Grandma. She's holding my hand. I'm maybe 5, missing a tooth, grinning like the world is brand new. I walked over, touched the glass. I did it, I whispered. And I did it your way. The city buzzed outside my window. But inside, it was calm. Because I had taken everything they tried to bury me with and built a home, not just of walls, but of words, of legacy, of truth. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't surviving. I was living. Story 2. They say breaking points come in whispers, not screams. Mine came in the form of a text message, under the blinding glare of fluorescent hospital lights. Can't make it. Big things happening. Just handle it. That was it. That's what my husband Marcus sent me while my mother was being rushed into emergency surgery. No punctuation, No emotion, just dismissal. I stared at the message, thumb hovering over my screen, not even sure what to type. For the sixth time, I had called him hoping, foolishly, that maybe this time he'd answer with something other than contempt. And when he finally did, it was just long enough to bark, "What is it now, Rachel? I'm in an important meeting," before hanging up. Important meeting. My mother might be dying, and he was networking over overpriced espresso. I'm Rachel Delaney, 45, and that night at Pine Hill General, I realized my marriage wasn't broken. It was gone. Mom was my last living parent, the matriarch, the glue, and I had no one beside me in that echoing hallway, except maybe the walls, which hummed like they were holding their breath with me. The nurses whisked her away to the OR, and I sank into a stiff plastic chair, numb. My thoughts kept circling back to our family estate, Linden Grove, a massive Victorian home tucked away in Southern Virginia. It had been in our family for 4 generations, with every creaky stair and antique doorknob holding a memory. Summers in the garden with Mom's roses, Christmases around the grand piano, Dad's deep laugh rumbling through the halls. That house was a piece of me, and apparently now it belonged to Marcus, because as I sat there, trying to keep myself from falling apart, my phone buzzed again. A new message from him. Sold the house. Heading to Argentina tonight with someone who actually makes me happy. You'll thank me eventually. For a second, all I felt was silence. No heartbreak, no fury, just silence. He really thought he won. What Marcus didn't know, what he could never have guessed, was that I'd been quietly watching, tracking every bank transfer, every late night call, every lie. My investigator, Jules, had been sending me a steady stream of receipts and screenshots for months. I knew about the affair with his assistant, Melina. I knew about the shell company in Buenos Aires. I knew everything. So I responded with one word, noted. Then I slipped my phone into my purse and stared at my mother through the ICU window, feeling something shift. Not grief, not vengeance. Something sharper. Marcus thought he'd played me. He had no idea I was already writing his ending. Flashback 15 years. I met Marcus at a charity fundraiser in Richmond. He was fresh-faced and charming. A junior associate at some boutique law firm. All ambition and soft eyes. He loved listening to my father ramble about property taxes and family trusts. Back then, he pretended to care about Linden Grove like it was sacred. He used to help my mom trim the hedges, bake pies with her, even bought her antique gardening tools one Christmas. I actually believed he loved us, that he saw the estate as part of his future too. But over time, that charm calcified into cold detachment. Late nights at the office turned into weekends away. Our conversations became dry logistics. When my dad passed 3 years ago, something in Marcus shifted completely, like he smelled blood in the water. He started questioning every decision I made about the house, pressuring me to sell off antique furniture, updating family rooms without asking, even forging my signature on a few appraisals. I chalked it up to grief at first. Then I found the receipt for the apartment in Buenos Aires. That was 2 months ago. That's when I stopped pretending and started planning. Jules had warned me earlier that week. He's been meeting with shady buyers, pushing documents that claim he owns the house outright. Thing is, Marcus never read the fine print. My grandmother was a paranoid genius. After watching one too many family inheritance squabbles destroy old money legacies, she locked Linden Grove in a trust that not even I could sell without a third-party administrator's approval. Meaning, Marcus had been trying to sell something that wasn't legally his. Oops. I opened Jules's most recent email. It had everything: photos of Marcus and Melina whining and dining potential buyers, video of him moving heirlooms out of the estate, copies of forged papers. But the worst part? My bank account, $840. The joint one was completely drained. He'd been bleeding me dry while I sat at my mother's bedside. Another ping from him, tossed out those dusty albums from the library. Buyers want the place cleared out. You're welcome. He was talking about the photo albums, the ones Mom made every year, hand-labeled. Pages that smelled like lavender and old glue. Our family's entire visual history, gone. I opened our estate's security app and scanned the live camera feeds. There he was laughing in the foyer with Melina, champagne glasses in hand, boxes all around them. I watched as she dangled a necklace from her finger's mom's necklace. A sapphire pendant passed down since 1904. I was still staring at the screen when Jules called. You need to check your email again. Now, she had new footage, more transactions. Turns out, Marcus wasn't just looting the estate. He was targeting my mother's assets too, setting up withdrawals from her retirement accounts, draining her insurance, rerouting everything offshore. And he was doing it all while I thought I was the one being paranoid. I called the hospital billing department on instinct. Yep, he'd canceled Mom's insurance last week. Said it was no longer necessary. She would have been uninsured during emergency surgery if I hadn't moved her to my policy months ago. Marcus thought he'd cornered me in grief, but grief makes you feel things. I wasn't feeling. I was calculating. By the time the doctor came out to tell me Mom had made it through surgery, I already had the blueprint for Marcus's downfall in motion. And when I called Mr. Benitez, the buyer Marcus had lined up for the estate, my voice didn't even crack. Yes, Marcus said you'd be in touch, Mr. Benitez said cheerfully. He mentioned the deal had to move fast. We've already wired $3.4 million this morning. I hope you haven't finalized anything yet, I said, already pulling up the trust deed on my tablet. Well, we did sign the agreement, but then I suggest you get your legal team on the phone. Because Marcus has no right to sell that house. It's in a protected trust, and he forged your documents. Silence. Then a soft, panicked, "What?" While he tried to piece that together, I texted Marcus, "You just sold a house you don't own. Hope that goes well." His reply was instant. "You're bluffing. You can't prove anything." I dropped the screenshot of the trust into the chat, and then I shut my phone off, because this was just the beginning. You know that strange stillness right before a thunderstorm? The kind where the air feels heavy and everything's just waiting? That's how it felt the moment I turned off my phone. I sat in that hospital room with my mom, her chest rising and falling slowly under a nest of wires and beeping monitors. And I realized this wasn't just about a house, or money, or even Marcus cheating. This was about legacy, memory, about someone trying to erase who we were. He was about to find out how hard that was going to be. I spent the next few hours making calls. Jules came by the hospital with 2 manila folders thick with printouts. One had trust documentation clean, legal, airtight. The other, a paper trail of everything Marcus had done over the past 6 months. Every bank withdrawal, every offshore transfer, every lie wrapped in legalese. Turns out Melina, his little real future, wasn't just eye candy. She was listed as the director of a shell company registered in Panama, the same one where Marcus had funneled hundreds of thousands in cash. Jules had even tracked down photos of them meeting with shady brokers in Buenos Aires. And because karma loves receipts, there was even a selfie of them toasting to their new life, with my mom's necklace clearly around Melina's neck. I forwarded all of it to Agent Carter at the bureau. He and I had started talking 2 weeks earlier when Jules flagged some suspicious real estate activity Marcus had tied to other elderly victims. "I'm impressed," Carter said after reading through the files. "We've been watching a similar scheme unfold in 3 states. This puts a nice bow on it." "Good," I said, "because the plane tickets say he's leaving tonight." Meanwhile, the buyer, Mr. Benitez, was spiraling. Once he realized the signatures Marcus had given him didn't match county records, and that the trust meant the sale was never valid, he tried to stop the wire transfer. Too late. "Well," I told him calmly, "if it helps, the FBI will be happy to explain your legal exposure in all this." He started stammering something about being deceived. I didn't have the heart or the energy to tell him that I didn't know doesn't usually hold up in court when you're trying to buy a stolen house. But the real fun? That came when Jules got a hit on the estate's security feed. "You're gonna want to see this," she said, spinning her laptop toward me. There they were, Marcus and Melina, loading the last few boxes into my dad's old Jeep, champagne in hand, laughing like they'd pulled off the heist of the century. And then Jules zoomed in on the passenger seat, my mom's medical files. "What the hell?" I said, leaning in. "He's got full scans, notes from her specialists, medication lists. This wasn't just fraud. He used her health as leverage." That's when something inside me turned. Not just anger, cold resolve. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. This was calculated, predatory. He wasn't getting away with this. At 6:15 p.m., Agent Carter called me. "They're checked in at Richmond International. Flight leaves in 2 hours. TSA's been alerted. We've got people watching the gate." Perfect. Jules was already in motion. She sent over digital backups of every legal file to the Bureau, emailed financial institutions to start freezing accounts, and my favorite part, triggered the silent alert system at the estate. See, my grandmother had been paranoid in the best way. Every room in that house had sensors, not just cameras, traps, not the kind that hurt people, the kind that record them, lock doors, seal safes, leave no room for plausible deniability. So when Melina decided to swing by the estate one last time, probably to grab some final souvenirs, she walked right into one. Jules and I watched live on her laptop as Melina snuck in through a window in Marcus's old study. She made a beeline for the antique safe built into the floorboards. "That's where we found the contracts," Jules whispered. Melina typed in the code like she'd done it a dozen times. The safe clicked open, and every exit in the room locked at once. A fine mist sprayed from the ceiling. Nothing dangerous, just invisible UV dye. Anyone marked by, it would glow like a concert wristband under blacklight for weeks. "She's not going anywhere," Jules said, smiling. We called local police to go retrieve her. Meanwhile, back at the airport, Marcus was lining up at the gate, totally unaware. Agent Carter patched me into airport security's feed. Marcus was all swagger, passport in hand, expensive carry-on rolling behind him. Melina's not so casually missing presence didn't seem to bother him. Probably thought she was wrapping up loose ends. And then, from both sides of the terminal, agents closed in. A woman in a navy suit approached him calmly, holding up a badge. At first, he smiled. Then his expression cracked. Confusion, then panic. Then, in a flash of pure cowardice, he shoved his suitcase at her and tried to bolt. He didn't get far. They tackled him before he hit gate 23. While that was happening, my phone buzzed again. A notification from my mom's insurance company. Apparently, Marcus had tried to cancel her coverage again that morning, just in case the earlier attempt didn't stick. Too bad I'd set up double verification. I'd also moved all her remaining accounts under my name with protective clauses 3 months earlier. Let him try. Every emergency transfer he triggered from that point on would just be another line of evidence. But the man wasn't done, because in his car, parked outside the estate, police found a go bag, 2 passports, $60 K in cash, and most damning of all, original copies of forged property deeds from 3 different families. He'd been doing this for years, targeting households when someone was hospitalized, faking power of attorney, selling off properties people didn't even know were on the market. Melina, she wasn't just helping him, she was part of it. Registered officer in half the fake LLCs. She was the one drawing up the real estate contracts. They'd been running this con coast to coast. I stood beside my mom's bed that night and just watched her sleep. Everything we loved, our history, our house, our dignity, he'd tried to turn into a cash out. And he might have gotten away with it if he'd married someone else. Someone who didn't pay attention, who trusted too much. But he married me, and I was done being quiet. Jules walked in around midnight holding a flash drive. "Got something for you," she said, handing it over. His schedule, his calls, and something else: automatic transfers. He had midnight withdrawals set up from your mom's pension. I didn't even blink. Already empty. Moved the funds last week. "Smart," she said. "It's gonna bury him." One last alert hit my phone before I went to sleep. A notification from the estate's alarm system. Unauthorized safe access detected. Evidence vault sealed. Melina was still trapped inside. As poetic as it gets. The next morning, I woke up to the kind of stillness that feels like a clean slate. Not peace exactly, more like clarity. Mom was stable, breathing on her own. The doctors said her recovery would take time, but the worst had passed. That alone felt like a small miracle. Marcus, on the other hand, had spent the night in a federal holding cell, stripped of his Rolex and his confidence. Melina, still locked in the study back at Linden Grove, marked head to toe in invisible ink, trying to shred forged documents with her bare hands. Not her brightest moment, but the part that really stuck with me, the part that made my chest tighten and my jaw clench, wasn't the fraud or the betrayal. It was that he did it all while my mom was fighting to stay alive. That level of cruelty, it burns something into you. Agent Carter met me that morning at the hospital. He looked tired but wired, like someone who'd had 2 hours of sleep and 6 cups of coffee. "We've got everything we need," he said, flipping open a thin laptop. "The safe at the estate? It wasn't just family documents. Your husband had files on at least 8 other families. Photos, account numbers, estate blueprints. All the same pattern: someone sick, someone old, someone too distracted to notice the walls closing in." I didn't say anything. I didn't have to, because I knew that feeling too well. "He targeted people at their weakest," I said quietly. "He waited for life to hit them hard, and then he took what he wanted." Carter nodded. "He's not going to see daylight anytime soon. But there's something else." He hesitated, and my stomach dropped. "What now?" "Melina's gone," he said. "She slipped out sometime after the police took her into custody. Switched identities. She's been trained in this. It wasn't her first con." For a second, I didn't know what to say. I'd watched her on that camera, seen the panic in her face, the way she clawed at the safe. But apparently, rats don't like staying caged. "She still has access to some of your information," Carter continued. "We froze what we could, but she might try to move fast." I took a slow breath. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out my grandmother's old diary again. "She won't get far." Inside the back cover was a second key, taped down with aging adhesive. My grandmother had left a backup safe in the attic, one even Marcus didn't know about. I'd found it a week ago. Inside were hard copies of everything: birth certificates, deeds, passwords, trust amendments. Everything they thought they destroyed, still here. "She built this place like a fortress," I said. Not really to Carter. Not just to keep things in, but to keep people like Marcus out. By noon, I was back at the estate. The air felt different, like the house itself had been holding its breath, waiting to be seen again. I walked room to room. The foyer still smelled faintly of cedar. Mom's gardening gloves were on the porch bench where she always left them. The old grandfather clock had stopped ticking. Marcus probably never bothered to wind it. But everything else was as it should be. Except the library. I stepped inside and stopped cold. Empty shelves. Dozens of them. The photo albums he'd claimed were junk, gone. I felt tears threaten, but I didn't let them fall. Instead, I walked to the back corner. My grandmother always kept locked and opened a small drawer. Inside, a memory card, labeled in her neat cursive, in case they forget who we are. I slipped it into my laptop. It was all there: scanned photos, voice memos, letters, video clips of Mom dancing with Dad in the kitchen, their laughter echoing off tile. He tried to erase us. We backed up everything. Later that afternoon, I got a call from Mr. Benitez, the buyer Marcus had roped in. "Miss Delaney, I'm so sorry. I had no idea what I was getting into." His voice was tight, shame-laced. The demolition company Marcus hired was fake, a shell. I would have lost everything. I've already filed a fraud report, and the bank is reversing the wire. I let him talk, let him feel it. Then I said calmly, "Next time you buy a house, make sure the person selling it actually owns it." Click. Jules came by that evening with a jump drive full of Melina's transactions. She'd traced her to a rental condo in Miami, trying to convert crypto to cash. FBI was already on her trail. "She won't last the week," Jules said, sipping from her thermos. "She's slippery, but she's not smart." Then she paused and looked at me. "There's more. Marcus had scheduled another asset transfer your mom's pension account. But when I checked the source, it was empty." I smiled. "Yeah," I said. "I moved the funds 3 weeks ago into a protected account tied to the trust. Set up a fake front balance just in case he got curious." Jules blinked, impressed. "You laid the trap." "He walked straight into it," I replied. "Just like Grandma would have wanted." That night, I sat in the garden. The stars were out. Crisp air, fresh after a spring rain, made the world smell like new beginnings. I looked over at the roses, what was left of them. Marcus had hacked down half the bushes trying to modernize the landscaping, but the roots were deep. Some of them were already growing back. It felt like a metaphor. Mom would be discharged in a few days. I'd already moved her room back to the east wing, the one with the morning light. I called the insurance rep and walked them through the forged cancellations. The agent gasped. I told her not to worry. I had it covered, because this house wasn't just walls and paint. It was survival. It was love, buried deep and tough as iron. Marcus thought he was selling a house, but what he tried to sell was a family's soul, and that doesn't go quietly. One last thing. Jules pulled me aside before she left and handed me a small velvet box. "I found this in the study," she said softly. "Thought you might want it back." I opened it slowly. Mom's necklace, the sapphire, still gleaming like truth. Sometimes justice isn't loud. Sometimes it's quiet, heavy, earned. Sometimes it sits in your palm, cool as stone, waiting for the storm to pass. The morning the arraignment came, the sky was gray, not stormy, just silent. Like it knew what was about to happen. I wore black, not out of mourning, but to match the clarity I'd found. I stood outside the courthouse in Richmond with my coat tight around me, watching the last of the leaves fall. Marcus used to call autumn the slow death of summer. He never understood it was also the beginning of the soil resting, getting ready to grow again. Inside, it was all marble and metal detectors, cold, busy, 100 little stories happening all at once. But mine, ours, it was front and center. Courtroom 2B federal fraud, wire transfers, property theft, elder abuse, forgery. The list went on. 37 counts total. Marcus looked thinner than I remembered. His hair wasn't combed. That tailored sharpness he always wore like armor was gone. He had shackles around his wrists and a court-appointed lawyer at his side. He didn't look at me when they brought him in, but I looked right at him. I wanted him to see me still standing, not broken, not bitter, just done. Melina wasn't with him. They caught her 2 days earlier, trying to cross into Belize using a fake passport and someone else's fingerprints. Turns out, when the walls start closing in, loyalty disappears fast. They'd be tried separately, different strategies, different lies, same outcome. I listened quietly as the prosecutor read through the charges, voice steady and sharp. The defendant systematically targeted families during times of vulnerability, medical emergencies, end-of-life care, using that moment of distraction to falsify documents and take what wasn't his. And then he held up one of the UV-stained contracts they'd pulled from the estate's safe. the jury murmured when they saw how much was marked. Every inch of this paper, the prosecutor said, glows with proof. I didn't flinch when Marcus finally turned to me, eyes bloodshot, mouth slightly open like he might say something, but he didn't. What could he possibly say? I'm sorry? He wasn't. I never meant to hurt you? He did. No. Silence was all I needed. The judge denied bail, said Marcus was a flight risk, cited his offshore accounts, his fake identity stash, and the international plane ticket purchased with money that didn't belong to him. When the hearing ended and they led him away, his eyes caught mine one last time. This time, I met them. Not with anger, with indifference. That's what broke him. Not the law, not the press, not the betrayal, just me, not caring anymore. 2 weeks later, I was back at Linden Grove, walking the upstairs hallway with bare feet. The wood beneath me was warm from the sun, and the air smelled faintly of lemon oil and roses. Mom was sitting up in bed now, smiling more, eating full meals. I'd moved my office into the library, refilled the shelves, framed copies of the old photos using the backup files Grandma left behind. Jules dropped by with croissants and good news. The FBI had officially connected Marcus and Melina's network to 12 families across 3 states. Some had lost homes. Some had lost savings. All of them thought they'd been alone, but now they weren't. We created a small fund from recovered assets. Not much, but enough for each family to start again. Karma doesn't always come fast, but it comes clearer when you can hold a check with your name on it and know it came from justice, not pity. Mom and I had tea out on the veranda that evening. The garden was still bare, but I saw signs of life everywhere, tiny green shoots pushing up through cracked soil. Nature, like truth, always finds a way back. She reached across the table, brushing her fingers over my wrist. You remind me of her, Grandma? She nodded. She built all this to protect us. But you kept it alive. I looked out at the horizon, soft and wide. She gave us the roots, I said. All I did was make sure no one dug them up. Before bed that night, I opened the small safe upstairs, the one Marcus never found. Inside were the original blueprints for the estate, letters, audio tapes of my grandparents, and the final version of my grandmother's will, the one Marcus tried to fake. I placed the real will in a new envelope, added a note. This house stands because we stood. It is not wealth. It is memory, and memory doesn't burn. I tucked it back inside the safe, locked it. Let him think he took everything. We never needed his idea of wealth. A month later, I received a letter from Marcus. Prison mail, plain white envelope, no return address. I didn't open it, just dropped it in the fireplace and watched it curl into smoke. Some things don't deserve a reply. They say revenge is best served cold. I disagree. It's best served quietly, when no one's looking. When the fire's out, the papers are signed, the house is warm, and the roses are starting to bloom again. Because that's when you know the war is over, and you're still home. Story 3. You ever get that feeling that something's off, but you can't quite name it? That's where I was, standing in the kitchen of the home I bought with my own damn hands, staring at a legal document. My husband just slid across the counter, like it was a dinner menu. Just sign it, babe, he said, with that fake, cozy voice people use when they're trying to sell you something. It's for tax reasons. You know how these things work. Sure, except I didn't. Not in the way he meant. My name's Julia Brennan. I'm 37, an ER doctor in Austin, and I bought this old craftsman house before I even met Alex. I was in my early 30s, riding high on adrenaline, ramen noodles, and the naive belief that smart choices guaranteed good outcomes. Spoiler alert, they don't. Anyway, back to the kitchen. I had just gotten the twins Noah and Lily down for a nap, and I was trying to get a protein bar down my throat before my next shift. And there was Alex, asking me to sign over the house into his name. It's just easier come tax season, he said. Right. Because married life is all about efficiency and giving up your only major asset. I don't know, Alex, I replied, my hand hovering over the document like it might burn me. I bought this place before we got married. It's kind of my fallback, you know? He smiled, but it wasn't a real smile. It didn't reach his eyes. And suddenly, that tight ball of anxiety I'd been pushing aside for weeks, it lit up like a flare. Something was wrong. Alex wasn't always like this. Or maybe he was, and I was just too tired to notice before. Between hospital shifts, diapers, and trying to remember if I'd eaten anything besides crackers in the past 24 hours, I hadn't really had the luxury of observation. But now that I was really looking, I started seeing all kinds of signs. He was working late more, hitting the gym again, picking fights and playing the victim when I asked simple questions like, "Why did you stop helping with daycare drop-offs?" And the kicker? He was glued to his phone like it had oxygen in it. I reached out to a friend, Layla, a real estate attorney I'd known since med school. Told her about the house thing, the paperwork, the urgency in his voice. She didn't sugarcoat it. "Julia, don't sign a damn thing. That doesn't save taxes. It transfers ownership. And if he's pushing hard, something shady is going on." I froze. Every instinct I'd honed in the ER, the ones that scream at you right before a patient crashes, kicked in. So I dug. Nothing too dramatic, just phone records, a few social media sleuths, some Venmo transactions labeled with little emojis and hearts. And then I found her. Her name was Kendra, mid-20s, worked at his marketing firm, blonde, bronzed, and constantly posting #blessed selfies from wine bars and yoga retreats. And one photo, taken at a real estate office, captioned "Big life changes ahead." My stomach dropped. That night, while Alex was still working late, I went to an electronics store Layla recommended, picked up a recording device, the kind you can tuck inside a cookbook on a kitchen shelf. "Protect yourself," the guy behind the counter told me. "People lie. Recordings don't." The next few days, I became an actress. Smiles, light conversation, listening without reacting. And every night, I added new audio files to my growing collection of lies. The moment I knew, really knew, was when he sat across from me again, a week later, pushing a new set of documents toward me, like some magician doing a card trick. "They're already signed by me," he said, all charm and fake concern. "Just your signature, and we're done." Smooth sailing. I looked at him, then at the papers, and then I leaned back in my chair. "Alex," I said slowly, "before I sign anything, can we talk about Kendra?" He blinked. Once, twice, then turned pale. "What are you talking about?" I pulled out my phone and showed him a screenshot of a Venmo transfer labeled brunch. Another one from Kendra's Instagram, with his car in the background. Then a clip audio, crisp and clear from our own kitchen. Him talking about how he'd get the house in his name and move on with someone who gets it. His face, priceless. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. "Here's the deal," I said calmly, like I was explaining discharge instructions to a patient. "You don't get the house. You don't get to trick me. And if you even think about trying anything else, this entire folder is going to my lawyer, your firm, and your parents." He tried to shout, tried to guilt trip. He even brought up the kids. "You're barely around, Julia. I'm the one who's here." "No," I said. "You're the one who was here when it suited you. Now, you're here for the house. Not for me, not for Noah and Lily." That night, I packed up the kids' overnight bags and went to my sister's place. And the next day I filed for divorce. That's when the real war started. If you've never seen a man's ego unravel in real time, let me tell you it's something. After I confronted Alex and left with the twins, he sent me no less than 16 texts in a single night. They started with confusion, "What are you talking about?" Moved quickly into rage. "You just destroyed our family," and then took a sharp left into desperation. "We can fix this. Let's talk. Please." Classic pattern. I didn't reply. I forwarded everything to my lawyer, James, a family law specialist. Layla connected me with. James was calm, professional, and had the energy of a man who'd seen one too many guys like Alex try to pull the same stunt. The good news, he said during our first meeting, is that you documented everything. The house is yours, premarital asset, and now we've got evidence of attempted fraud. I didn't feel triumphant. Not yet. I felt tired, like my body was catching up to the emotional marathon I'd been running in silence for months. But I nodded, because I knew I'd made the right call. Alex, of course, wasn't done. He started showing up at the house unannounced, banging on the door like I owed him something. One time he even brought groceries, like that would make me forget the affair or the gaslighting. I didn't let him in. A week later, my lawyer filed a restraining order not because I was afraid of him, but because I needed boundaries. He wasn't violent, just manipulative, relentless, and I knew that if I gave him an inch, he'd claw for a mile. That night, after the paperwork was filed, I got a message from Kendra. Yeah, her. It was short. Just one line. I didn't know he was married. I stared at the screen for a long time, not sure what to feel. I wasn't mad at her. She didn't owe me anything. But still, the timing was suspicious. She didn't follow up, and I didn't reply. That part of my life was already on fire. I wasn't going to throw more fuel on it. Meanwhile, Alex's mask was cracking. He tried to paint me as emotionally unstable in early filings, claimed I was too busy with work to be a good mom, accused me of being neglectful because I used daycare. James laughed when he read the filings. He's going for the character assassination route. Typical. So he hit back with everything. Audio clips, financial records, texts where he clearly outlined his plan to take the house. I wasn't just ready, I was surgical, focused. The way I get in trauma cases, when a patient's flatlining and I have seconds to act. This time, the patient was my life, and I wasn't about to lose it to someone like him. The court date came faster than I expected. My stomach was in knots walking into that room. Alex sat across from me, clean-shaven, wearing the same suit he wore to our anniversary dinner 2 years ago. Funny how I remembered that. His lawyer looked like every guy who's ever said, "It's not personal, just business." But James? James was ice. He laid out the facts calmly, precise, no fluff, just receipts. And when he played the audio, Alex's own voice, talking about how she'll cave if I pushed the tax angle, there was an audible shift in the courtroom. The judge's eyes narrowed. Alex looked like he wanted to melt into his seat. Later that night, Alex tried to call me. I didn't answer, but I listened to the voicemail once. Just once. You didn't have to go nuclear. We could have worked it out. Kendra's gone. It was just a phase. You're still my wife. I deleted it. Let me make one thing clear. I wasn't angry that he cheated. I mean, I was. But the betrayal ran deeper. It was the planning, the manipulation, the fact that he looked me in the eye and lied with a straight face, that he would have taken the roof from over his own children's heads, just to get a head start with some shiny new girlfriend. I wasn't heartbroken. I was done. Things moved fast after that. His firm found out about some shady expenses on his company card. Guess those wine and cheese dates with Kendra weren't as private as he thought. HR launched an investigation. By the time our divorce was finalized, Alex had been fired for misappropriating funds. Not my doing, just karma showing up early. He didn't even contest the custody agreement after that. Couldn't afford to. We settled on joint legal custody with physical custody defaulting to me and supervised visits until further notice. He moved into a one-bedroom apartment, an hour away. I never celebrated. Not exactly. There were no champagne toasts. Just a quiet morning a week later when I walked the twins to daycare and realized I wasn't scared anymore. That I didn't have to scan the parking lot or hold my breath every time a number I didn't recognize showed up on my phone. I was free. There's this moment after a trauma where the noise dies down, when your body's still bracing, but nothing hits. That's where I was standing in that silence, finally understanding what peace might feel like. And still, I wasn't done. Because the house, it was still mine. And I had plans. The day the divorce was finalized, I didn't cry. I didn't celebrate either. I sat at the kitchen table, my table, in my house with a mug of coffee going cold in my hands. Outside the window, the twins were running barefoot in the yard, chasing bubbles. Lily's hair was a mess. Noah had mismatched socks. They were happy. That was all I needed. The court paperwork had officially listed the house as mine. Sole ownership. No liens, no contest, just mine again. Like it always should have been. And Alex? Well, he was unraveling. I'd heard through a mutual acquaintance that Kendra dumped him the same week. His firm let him go. She'd posted a vague, passive-aggressive quote on her Instagram story. Something like, "You can't build a future with someone who still lies to themselves." I didn't care enough to watch it twice. But what really hit? The moment he came back around, begging. It was late on a Friday. I had just put the twins down and was about to finally fold the mountain of laundry that had become a permanent fixture in my living room. Then came the knock. Not loud, hesitant. I opened the door and there he was. Unshaven, wrinkled button up, no swagger left in him. "I messed up," he said. I leaned against the doorframe and didn't say anything. "I lost everything," he added, like it was a tragedy I should mourn with him. "My job, my apartment, Kendra moved out. I've been staying at my cousin's. I don't even know who I am anymore." That part, I believed. He looked like a man who had finally met the consequences of his own decisions and had no clue what to do with them. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he added quickly. I wanted to say sorry for what I did to you, to the kids." I stayed quiet. It wasn't anger. It wasn't pride. It was just the realization that I had nothing left to give him. Not pity, not rage, just silence. "Okay," I finally said. "Thank you for saying that. But this door, it doesn't open for you anymore." I watched him nod, slow and hollow. He turned around, walked down the driveway like he wasn't sure where to go next. I didn't watch him disappear. I just closed the door and locked it. That was the last time he came by. The weeks that followed were full of little wins. I got promoted chief of emergency services. My colleagues said I'd earned it. Honestly, I just stopped playing small. Without Alex draining my energy with petty arguments and guilt trips, I remembered who I was, and I brought her back to work with me. The twins adjusted faster than I expected. Kids are funny like that, resilient in ways adults can't even grasp. They asked about their dad sometimes, mostly in simple ways. "Why doesn't Daddy live here anymore?" I answered with truth but not anger. "Daddy and I made different choices. Now we live in different homes, but you're still so loved." They accepted it, moved on, started calling this place Mama's house with this little sense of pride, like they knew they were part of something safe. And it was safe now. I started making changes, renovated the upstairs room into a play area, replanted the backyard garden Alex used to roll his eyes at, painted the living room a warm green, one of those little things I always wanted to do, but never did because he thought it was too loud. Funny, he never had a problem being loud. Every weekend, I lit candles, cooked dinner with music playing, and watched the twins giggle over nothing on the rug. It wasn't fancy, but it was peaceful. And then, one night, I got a letter from Alex, handwritten, 4 pages, apologies, regret, memories of when we met. A line that stood out to me: "I thought I could be someone else by taking something from you, but I never figured out how to be that person on my own." I read it twice, folded it, filed it away with the divorce papers. I didn't need to reply. Some bridges, once burned, are meant to stay ash. Months passed, and slowly, I realized I didn't think about him anymore. Not when I picked up the twins from school. Not when I scrubbed crayon off the walls. Not even when I caught a glimpse of his old hoodie I'd shoved to the back of the closet. He had faded, like a bruise that took too long to heal but eventually stopped hurting. And me? I was living, really living, Some nights I sat on the porch, glass of wine in hand, watching the kids chase fireflies. No more calculating silence. No more second-guessing my instincts. Just me, my babies, and a quiet I had fought tooth and nail to earn. People sometimes ask if I'm dating again. Not yet. Not because I'm scared, just because I'm full for now. Full of the things I lost in that marriage. Confidence, peace, energy, joy. I want to enjoy those before I let someone else in again. And when I do, it'll be on my terms. Because here's the truth. I didn't win because I proved him wrong. I won because I protected what was mine. My house, my children, my self-respect. And I did it without yelling, without drama, just choices, just truth, just walking away and never turning back.